So here are the tools that we're going to be using today. They were in the beginning on the supply list. So I'm just going to go ahead and push them off to the side. And we're going to begin with our 3.5 by 3.5 inch tile and our ruler to create the pieces of our block. So we're going to start by measuring 3/16 of an inch on either side of the tile in order to create a frame. So this tile is going to have a 3/16 of an inch frame or border all along this block. So I'm just going to put those hash marks down, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect those side to side. And I'm going all the way to either side so I get this corner division as well. With the rounding, I'm not sure if we're calling it a square or a triangle. So in either case, we're creating this tiny little space on each corner with that border. All right, so now that we have that frame created, I'm going to go ahead and measure the inside of that border line, and I'm going to divide that in half. So it's 1.5 plus 1 line, or 1 9/16. And I'm going to do that in both directions. Same 1 9/16. I'm going to add that little plus sign so I know where that center really lies. So where those two lines cross, that's my center. I'm going to now take that plus sign and extend those lines side to side to create that plus sign right in the center of our framed tile. So now that we have our 4 boxes defined, I'm going to go ahead and divide the outside line as it faces me in half. So that's going to take us to 3/4, the space between 3/4 and the line right after. So that space is going to get my little half tick. 3/4 and the space. So now that I have this first box created and defined with my hash marks, I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to use the line that's facing me as my division line. So the line at the bottom is going to always get your little hash mark as you turn your tile. So you're going to make this mark, use the line that's facing you, and turn your tile. You're going to do that in each of the remaining boxes. So once you have those hash marks dividing those spaces, you're going to go right across and connect those side to side. Only within that box, right? You're only staying within each individual box, turning your tile and connecting those hash marks side to side. So you're going to kind of get these building blocks of squares or rectangles when you're done. So here's where we are. So now that we have these divider lines creating rectangles within the square, we're going to go on that new line that we just created and put a little dot in the middle of that. Just one dot in the middle of that center line. And I know that this is so tedious, but once we get our quilt set up, we'll be smooth sailing for the fun parts, right? So in my large quilt series, if you've been doing this with me, you've heard me say I used official tiles to create the pieces of the quilt. But because we're using a 3.5-inch tile, we need to divide the space with our pencil to create those individual pieces. So just a little bit different. It's a little bit, that's why it's Zentangle Inspired art, right? Because we're using our ruler, we're being very particular in what we're doing here. So now that we have our dot in the center, we're going to take the corner of our rectangle and connect it up to that center dot. So we're working on the inside of our plus sign. So we're using the rectangle that's closest to the plus sign. And we're using that hash that we laid down, hash mark, and we're using the bottom corners of the rectangle that lays on our center plus sign. And we're going to create these triangular shapes inside of each one of those rectangles. Okay, so now that we're all strung up, we have this kind of pinwheel looking expression on the inside with these rectangular sections along the outside. We're all done with our stringing. So we're going to go right to our color again. I'm going to go ahead with my 991, that deep yellow, and I'm going to lay once again that palette onto, or my marker onto my palette. And I'm going to once again use my blender to pick up that color. Just if you've been using your blender, make sure that you have cleaned off that tip. So inside of each one of these little rectangular spaces, I'm going to go ahead and add that deeper yellow color. And again, we can make this as deep and luxurious as we want. And I think that this time I am gonna just go ahead and make it a bit more concentrated, a bit more bright with my color. Maybe even being a bit more diligent with the saturation as well. Because we're gonna have a lot of yellow happening in this tile if you're following my suggestions. So I want this to be very distinctly different from the next yellow that we pick up. Okay. So I'm just going to go into each one of those small rectangles with this beautiful buttery yellow. Building it up until it's the color that I want. Still seeing that texture of the marker, or of the blender, I should say. We're not getting that smooth, outlined, direct contact marker to paper with those real detailed, overlapping, structured lines, being able to see exactly where that marker went, right? Just getting this beautiful wash of color. Yes, we're able to build upon it, add more depth to the color as we wish. Or we can stop in a bit lighter phase as well. Just enjoy the process. This is supposed to be fun. We're on a journey exploring the 50 states, creating such fun material as we try to pull tangles that kind of help define the state. So we're creating these fantastic fabrics inspired by what the state has to offer. What is the state known for? So we're in Louisiana right now. What do you think we're going to be offering this fabric to honor Louisiana? It's been so fun creating these pieces for this journey. Can't wait to get them into the frames, actually. I'm going to go to my 526 now, and that's going to go into these big center triangles. Clean off my blender so that I'm not making green and I have this beautiful blue. Embracing that variation, that texture that by default of the blending happens. Cleaning that blender off. I'm going to go to that light yellow, that 0200. Sorry, it's not 0200, it's 20. In either case, it's the light yellow or whatever your third color is. You'll notice if you're following along on this journey with me that we're always pulling some form of common thread. And the tangles are not the common thread because I'm choosing or trying to choose tangles that make sense to the state that we're doing. So I'm tying together a cohesive visual for all 50 states to have a voice, but work together in one universal quilt. So there's some form of overlap, one to the tools that we're using, which isn't a bad thing because, you can just keep your supplies close at hand for each week and only change out one or two items as opposed to having to scrounge through the toolbox every week and pulling out a slew of different tools. But it also gives us that visual of cohesiveness. There's some commonality in each quilt or each block that will give this overall vision a beautiful, bigger picture. Yeah. So I'm going to be framing all 50 of my states in a 20 by 40 frame. And I'm all done, which I can't wait to put together and stitch that final quilt together. Even if you're just here for one quilt on this journey, I appreciate you. All right. So we're all done adding our details on the inside of our quilt, and I'm going to now do the outside border, that edge, that frame that we did. But this time I'm going to go directly to my marker. So instead of blending it, I'm going to take that real concentrated color and I'm going to go right to my tile's edge. And I want to make sure that I also get the edges of my tile so I don't have any white deckled edge showing. Now, why that matters is when we put these blocks together to form our quilt, if you don't add color to the sides of your tiles, you're going to have this white edge that shows through, which the material, when we create a quilt, doesn't have a white core. Therefore, there's no white edges that would be seen, right? So we just want to wrap this ink right around the edge of the tile as well. And then in each corner, I'm using that 526, that beautiful blue, again, directly onto the tile, getting rid of those white edges. Just in that little corner square or triangle, whatever you want to call it, that open space on the tile's edge. Okay, so we're all colored up. So I'm going to go to my light gray, and that's how I'm going to add the tangles into each one of these sections in order to create my fabric. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into each one of these little triangles, and I'm going to offer some bead line. So of course our bead line is going to um, kind of suggest our Mardi Gras fun that happens in Louisiana. Yeah. So I'm going to start in the corner in the top of my triangle, and I'm just going to add some flowy lines that fall down, two to the center and one to either side. And then I'm going to randomly add dots to these lines. So I add 3 dots, leave a space, and then if you have room for any more dots, just go ahead and add those dots. And wherever I started on any one of my lines, I'm going to offset on another line. So I'm going to take this space and I'm going to add my 3 dots. Leave a space, 3 dots. And it doesn't need to be perfect, right? We're just offering a suggestion of varying little beads onto this bead line. And I'm going to do that for each triangle. So you'll see that my beads are kind of blossoming because my marker is still a little bit um, damp from being applied. So if you just want to pause me so that this doesn't happen to you, by all means, just go ahead, take that pause, allow your ink to dry just a few more moments, and then come back to me. Taking your time, enjoying the process, not getting caught up in the particulars. Doesn't matter if beads fall in the same place, if they overlap, right? It's all good. It always all works out. Taking that breath. With each bead strand that I lay, I hear the music, I see the parades. I've never been to Mardi Gras, but can only imagine the fun. So I'm putting myself in what I visualize Mardi Gras to be, based on what I've seen in movies and news, yeah, with each bead. So fun. All right, so there are our bead lines, all the necklaces that we've collected for the day, yeah. And we're going to move into these larger triangular spaces, and we're going to add some hermine in there, which is a little representative of the fleur-de-lis to me. So here we go. Inside of each of these triangles, I'm going to start with 4 dots. So I'm going to start just down beyond the peak of that triangle, and I'm going to add a dot. And then underneath that dot, I'm going to add 1 below and 2 off to the side. And then I'm going to turn those dots into rice shapes. So I'm going to go up to my point, peak of my triangle, and then back down to my dot. And I'm going to do that to the 2 outside dots as well. Adding those rice shapes side to side using those dots. And then once I fill those 3 dots and I have this stranded dot down here. So what I'm going to do with that stranded dot is I'm going to pull down to that bottom left corner. So I'm going to draw a line, kind of a slightly arched line down to that left corner. And then I'm going to mirror that same kind of arch over to the right corner. Below that dot, using this center-ish as my guide, I'm going to lay a rounded point. So a rounded V. I don't want to round it all the way around the bottom. I do want it to come to a point, but I'm arching either side of that V. So from the top of that rounded V, I'm going to draw another arched line that auras the line above, tethering and meeting in the corner. Okay. So I'm going to aura and tether right to the corner. I'm going to do the same thing on the right side. Top of the V, aura, tether. Okay. So this is the base of hermine as it fits into our triangle. So what I'm going to do is on each one of these rice shapes, I'm going to tether an aura and just add some lines into that tethered aura to kind of show the shadow of the depth of this rice shape. I'm going to do that to the left side, turning my tile as I go so the left side is consistent with each rice shape. Okay. And then on the inside of this kind of skirt that we've put on this, I'm going to go ahead and offer a rice shape right into the center. So from that rice shape, or from that base where that rounded V was, I'm going to pull back another arid line that tethers into that space. Same thing as with our rice shapes. I'm just going to go ahead and add some little hash lines in there to show the depth, the 3D space of this vision. I'm going to do the same, but I'm probably not going to be able to add any lines into this space. So I'm just going to go ahead and redefine an aura line, or redefine that left line a few times to create, again, that depth on the left side of that rice shape. And then I'm going to go to the right side of this V, and I'm going to tether and pull a line weight up into the right arm. And then I'm ever so slightly going to bring a line off the top and aura and tether to the right corner. And again, this one I'm just going to add some lines. You can color whatever into that space. You can wait until we get to color and use your colored pencil as kind of the depth and the shadow to all of this as well. So there we have it. This is our Hermine expression that we're going to be using into each one of these triangles. So here we go. I'm going to come just below the point and I'm going to offer a dot. From that dot, I'm going to lay a dot below and a dot to either side of that center dot below. Now I'm going to take this center dot and I'm going to create a rice shape right up into the peak. The dot to the left, rice shape to the left side of the triangle. The dot to the right, rice shape to the right side of that triangle. And this stranded dot right in the center, that's where we're going to arch slightly down and land into the corner of the triangle. And then we're going to mirror, slightly arch down, and land into the right corner of the triangle. And we're going to use this half line as kind of our goal point for this rounded V that's coming right into the bottom of that triangle. So from the top of that rounded V, we're going to aura and tether into the left side. We're going to mirror and aura and tether to the right side. Adding that rice shape into the center. And then we're going to go back to the 3 rice shapes above, tether and aura, and then adding either ink or lines to kind of define that 3D vision of those rice shapes. So the left side, turning your tile of each one of those rice shapes. And then the left side of the rice shape in the center, I'm just going to go back and forth, add a few redefine lines to add that redefine in there, or add that depth in there. So now I'm going to aura the left side and tether into the corner. Again, adding lines or ink to show the depth. The right side of the V. And adding a slight little extension to bring the aura and tether to the top of the right side. Two more triangles to go. Adding our dots, our race shapes. Being mindful of our breath. Checking in with those shoulders. Drop them down away from your ears. Maybe even allow your mouth to ever so slightly drop forward and drop open and pull that tongue away from the roof of your mouth. Enjoy the repetition of the process. Allow that magic to happen. Okay. So there's our Hermine, which is representative of our fleur-de-lis in Louisiana. I've had so much fun trying to work through tangles and come up with, um, tangles that mean something to what the whole project is as a whole. Um, so kind of makes me smile just even saying how they relate. So here we are heading into these pale rectangular spaces. And we're going to add the tangle Be Jazzy in there. Be Jazzy for our Louisiana jazz roots. So on either side of this rectangle, I'm going to start by adding elongated S's. So I'm not starting right along my line or my section line. I'm going to move in just ever so slightly, and I'm going to do a loose elongated S. So just a row of elongated S's, and using your go behind, do um, whatever you see. And then I'm going to go to the flip my tile, turn my tile, and I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing, adding another row in the opposite direction of these elongated S's. So I have 2 rows of these elongated S's, okay? And now on the top of each of the left side, I'm going to make an extension and hook the top of that S. And on the bottom, turning my tile, now the top, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to create a hook off of what I've already laid. So from that hook, I'm going to pull backwards, aura, and tether. Pull backwards, aura, and tether. Maybe they're looking a little bit like saxophones, maybe. And then I'm going to turn my tile and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So in between those, I'll call them saxophones, we may or may not have space. If we do, in between the 2 hooks, I've added an orb. So in between the 2 hooks, I've added an orb. And by filling in that space, you may see a diamond space in here. Yeah. So we could enhance this by adding that diamond into the space. And then on either side, I'm going to aura the flow of those S's. And I'm going to take it to the edge of that rectangle to kind of define the edge of that fabric. And then in each of these waves, I'm going to add a little half orb underneath, almost crescent moon style. So inside of this space, I'm going to once again try to offer some 3D to these elements here. So on the outside, I'm going to tether a little line weight that once again, I'm going to offer little hash marks or lines or ink, however you see it, again, to show that depth. Turn my tile and do the same thing to the other side. And if by default you have more room on your center than you do on your outside, you can always add your line weight to the inside of these S curves as well, depending on how they fell, right, for you. So allow your piece to speak to you. If whatever I'm saying just doesn't really work or it's not really speaking to you, by all means, don't do it. Allow your creative voice to shine. So I'm going to do the same thing to each one of those orbs going down the center, just on the left-hand side, adding that tethered aura. And then on each diamond, that bottom left arch of my diamond, I'm going to go ahead and aura that line and add hashes inside of that. So there is our Be Jazzy tangle, a little bit spruced up into our quilt. All right, here we go again. Turning my tile, I'm going to offer these elongated S's down the left side of my rectangle. And it doesn't matter if you fit the same amount of S's in as you did before, because this is material we might not have cut at the same position, right? Even though fabric is typically a repeating pattern, doesn't mean we got it cut at exactly the same spot. So it's all good. Offer yourself grace and just allow your pen to flow. Adding those hooks to the ends of those S shapes. Adding that aura that tethers to the back side. Again, maybe getting these saxophone shapes to define our Be Jazzy. In between the hooks of that S, I've added an orb. And by adding that orb, we may be seeing that diamond shape form. Going to enhance that. Then on the outside left, and right, this loose aura wave. Here's where our enhancements come into play. So again, based on where you have more room or not at all, depending on your liking, I'm going to go ahead and tether line weight in the back side, and then add those little hash lines to that line weight to add that depth. Same thing on the other side. The left side of each of those orbs. And the left side of each of those diamonds. And then underneath each one of those humps of my outer wave, just going to add a little half orb with some drama in it. Two more to go. Enjoy the process. Don't forget to breathe. Okay, so we are all tangled up. Our quilt is coming together, but right now it just looks like any other Zia. So we need to turn it into a quilt. And we're going to do that with our dark gray, our number 44 micron. And all we're going to do to give this quilt some detail is look at each individual element. Each one of these shapes is a different patch to the block. So we're going to have to stitch those together. So one staccato little short dashed line creates that stitching, that visual piecing together of each one of these pieces of fabric. So we're going to slowly and intentionally work our way around each one of these elements to sew them together to form one quilt block. So patches become blocks and blocks become quilts. So when I'm done with all 50 of my State ZenQuiltz, I'm going to have a beautiful quilt displayed in a 20 by 14 frame. And I can't wait to see it put together. Taking your time, enjoying the process. Deliberate, intentional strokes. We don't want sloppy tails on the ends of our lines. We want them to be nice and crisp. So the slower, more intentional you are with laying those lines, the cleaner your sewing of the pieces together becomes. When you think that you're all done stitching those center patterns, go ahead and change your perspective. If you missed one, it will jump out at you. So just make sure that all of those individual patterns are stitched up. And once they are, we're going to go to the outside border and we're going to stitch that as well. So we're going to stitch the corner as an individual unit, and then I'm going to stitch the left side and across the top of that rectangular section of our border. And I'm going to opt to not stitch along the tile's edge just yet because I want to wait until I get my pieces together. I'm thinking that I will inevitably go ahead and stitch those quilts or those blocks from side to side as well. But I'm going to hold off just because I'm not sure, uh, honestly, how it's going to end up in the end. So I'm just going to wait on those edges. If you're calling your journey done with one tile, you'll probably want to go ahead and just stitch the edge of your tile as well. Or you can go ahead and stitch it regardless as you travel through this journey. Okay, so there we are. We're all stitched up. Our block is um, one unit and is all put together. This block will then be turned into a quilt or not. Maybe it's a wall hanging, right? So I'm going to go to my shading now, and I'm going to grab those colored pencils that were on your supply list or any other colors that you've opted for. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to focus on each individual tangle and add shading to the tangles, but rather I'm going to be adding shading to each element, to each patch of the block. So I'm going to start with my darker yellow, that 1034. And around each one of these smaller triangles, I'm going to go ahead and in a circular motion right at that stitch line, I'm going to go ahead and offer some shading. So in essence, these stitches create a puckering in our material, right? So that fabric pulls, it creates a pucker. And when the fabric puckers, the center poofs up and creates a little pillow, right? That highlight in the center is what we're focusing on here by doing this technique. And by all means, this is just a suggestion. If you want to do individual tangle shading, always an option. Inspired by me, created by you. If there's ever anything that I ask you to do and it really just doesn't speak to you, don't do it. Again, listen to that creative voice. Don't ignore it. Don't push it down. I'm going to go now to my blue, and in those blue triangles, same technique, circular motion right up against those stitch marks. I'm just offering a light pressure. You can always add more, right? Just gonna offer that light pressure and give it that one coat of shading so that the colored pencil kind of doesn't take over that color. And that circular motion allows you to kind of blend in a bit better. You're not getting those real defined lines or edge lines, right? Beautiful. And now I'm going to take that 917, that lighter yellow, and I'm going to go right into that Be Jazzy section. Do the exact same thing. So there we have it, Louisiana. Offer yourself gratitude and appreciation for taking this time out of your schedule for some creative play. If you're joining me for one quilt, I appreciate you. If you're joining me for the states that you've lived in or have visited or whatever has meaning to you, I appreciate you. If you're on for the whole 50 state journey, I appreciate you. Offer yourself that signature, that chop, that initial, own that creativity. And until next time, thank you so much for joining me on this 50 state Zen Quilts journey.